Who will save your soul? Well, if your name by chance happens to be Gwydir, and the story happens to be SoulQuest, then the answer is your wife Alice, of course. Also, before you get up in the comments and you type about how I am mispronouncing the son of King Arthur's name, it's how they say it in the game, and here we are. Anyway, you don't really have much of a choice but to accept the help of Alice, considering you've been killed by a boar-like creature. Wink wink, nod nod, more King Arthur lore. And the only hope of reviving you is the now widowed Alice, convincing Morrigan, the goddess of death, to do her a solid. Alice is the second best fighter in the land, after Gwydir, of course. Turns out, gods need a lot of convincing in the form of violence, and what unfolds is a hack-and-slash adventure that just might have you cursing your gods. But does SoulQuest have what it takes to raise the dead and keep the interest of the living, or is it just another soulless entry into the genre? We're obviously going to talk about it, but before we do, please take a moment to subscribe so you don't miss any of the indie gaming goodness. And while you're poking around down there, keep the combo going and head over to patreon.com/idreamofindiegames, where you can net yourself some pretty killer perks like early and ad-free content, exclusive shows, Discord access, a shout out at the end of every video, and so much more. Your indie gaming community is waiting for you. Fun fact, SoulQuest is also apparently the name of a church and a YA fiction novel, so don't take a wrong turn when you're searching up this title from Soul Blade Studio. The SoulQuest in question begins with some basic combat tutorials and the aforementioned lore building. Players control Alice in her efforts to bring the defeated Gwydir back from the clutches of death, and controls begin simple enough. Controller is recommended for this title despite the fact that my PC insisted on peppering in keyboard and mouse prompts on tutorial screens just to spice things up, I'd imagine. As Alice, your starting moveset includes a light attack, a heavy attack, a run, jump, and dash. You'll use these inputs as you'd expect, learning enemy patterns and using crowd control and juggling to gain the upper hand against hordes of creatures. SoulQuest does feature a few different difficulty options with a brief explanation of what players can expect of the challenge level. I've played a few hack-and-slash games in my day and expected that I'd be just fine opting for the normal difficulty. I was not. I was also under the impression that difficulty could be changed at any time from the home of Abanus, which serves as your main hub. He's the Merlin-esque wizard that is serving as your sensei as you train to become a god slayer and save your husband's soul, obviously. So this was only a half-truth. Yes, you can change the difficulty, but your quest progress will not carry over to the new difficulty setting. So, for example, if you start on normal but decide halfway through that the challenge levels are a few Skullvilles hotter than you were expecting, you can switch to easy, but you'll start back at quest 1. Choose wisely is all I can recommend here. Unless you enjoy backtracking, in which case, what is wrong with you? The good news is you also are able to purchase upgrades to your abilities, combat, and magic from old Gandalf's shack, and these upgrades do carry over when you change difficulties. Small victories, I tell ya. While we're on the subject of upgrades, the currency here is the souls of your slain enemies, a very original concept, no doubt. These souls will only be retained by reaching a portal, which serves as a checkpoint and can also transport you back to Dumbledore's humble doorstep. Don't worry, I am almost out of wizard names, I promise. Interacting with these portals also restores your health, so you'll definitely be able to unclench your butt cheeks a little bit at least when you see one on the horizon. Between portals, your quests unfold as follows. Platform your way through levels that feature unique environmental hazards ranging from falling meatballs to ice spikes, crumbling platforms, tall cliffs begging for clunky wall jumps, poisonous flowers, and bouncy mushrooms. All the standards here. The funny thing about the platforming is, once you unlock a double jump, you really don't need to mess around with all of the other maneuvers the game tries to incorporate, like the running and jumping and downward slashing to bounce off of spikes. Can you still do these things? Sure. But it's a lot easier to just double jump, sprinkle in the occasional air dash, and get out of harm's way. Platforming in general definitely has a level of stiffness to it that makes it feel dated, not in a fun, nostalgia goggles way though, unfortunately. Because at the same time, the default controls do not allow for you to use the D-pad to control our protagonist, so the control scheme feels a bit at odds with itself. When you're not doing ye old parkour, you'll be throwing switches to open gates, not exactly a puzzle but as close as this game gets to one, and facing off against waves of enemies in enclosed encounters. These encounters are typically 2 waves deep, and each locale adds new enemy types into the mix. These enemies can be divided into a few classifications: basic grunt, flying grunt, and big strong grunt. These flying varieties are by far the most annoying, at least in my humble opinion. Nothing gets more damage in on me than the godforsaken dragon enemies that would float all the way up to the top of the screen, completely out of reach, and vomit fireballs at me like they just completed the one-chip challenge. Absolutely infuriating. During combat, you'll build a combo by getting in licks and not taking hits, as you'd probably expect. These combos are graded by letters, maxing out at a double S. Once an enemy gets a hit in, it breaks your momentum, which will have to be built up again. The further you get into the game, the more moves are unlocked, with all of them cataloged in the options menu for quick reference. Later in gameplay, you'll have magic you can utilize, as well as some big finishing moves to help clear out a screen faster. Credit where credit is due. I enjoyed pulling off these more unique moves against a formidable foe, and it was fun to see what kinds of combinations I could string together to keep my letter grade up. This is important for a hack and slash game after all, so this is where I found the game to be most successful. Once you platform and combo your way through the end of a quest, you'll be ranked on your time, combat style, and number of deaths, and it will be on to the next one until you eventually face off against a boss. Compared to the levels, these literal god-tier bosses were surprisingly tame and pretty easy to spam into oblivion, even for me, a person who is notoriously bad at bosses. Taking in the visuals in SoulQuest, I am a little mixed. On one hand, I did find some of the pixel art charming, particularly in cutscenes. However, there is also a level of emptiness to a lot of the environments that left me feeling a bit hollow. There were some issues with the text on tutorial screens, including the improper inputs on the display, which was confusing when learning new moves, as well as an odd issue where there were often the letter N after a period in dialogue. I'm sure this is something that could be patched out, but it was a little bit distracting at least. The enemies also got very repetitive, with early baddies sticking around like a clingy ex throughout most of the game. I know we've discussed a lot of negatives, but perhaps the most vexing thing about SoulQuest is the way the audio is mixed. The game does feature voice acting, and they sadly broke my golden rule, which goes as follows. No voice acting is better than poor voice acting.
I'm sorry, I wasn't capable of
You did great. Sorry for taking so long.
This is an odd one though, because the voices themselves aren't inherently bad, but the volume levels vary dramatically from character to character. Some bombastic gods will speak at a whisper when compared to Alice's booming lines. Other times, dialogue will be drowned out by the music entirely. Unfortunately, the music's also limited and highly repetitive. As you're ranking up your combo, the music changes in combat, which would be cool, but by the time I had survived a few hours, I never wanted to hear the battle music again. And that's it. That's SoulQuest in a nutshell. It's functional, but is it fun? That's going to depend on your tolerance for repetition, clunky platforming, and less than polished overall design. The moveset variety and combat engine is decent, but it is buried under the weight of some of the game's more glaring issues. Here at I Dream of Indie Games, we have a Genie Lamp rating tier that ranges from the coveted Golden Genie Lamp of approval for games that cannot be missed, down to the fearsome Indie Krampus for games that are better left with the goddess of death herself. When it comes to SoulQuest, it earns itself the table lamp of mediocrity. It's got soul, but it's not a soldier.